It started with a package, a plain weathered envelope with no return address, just my name, Daniel Rowe, written in jagged, uneven letters. I found it wedged between bills on my doorstep on a rainy Tuesday morning. I wasn't expecting anything, and the paper had an odd, musty scent, like old books left too long in a damp basement. Inside was a folded map. Not a modern one, but an old parchment-style sheet. Edges curled, torn in places. The map detailed a stretch of wilderness I'd never heard of, Meyerfield Hollow, somewhere in upstate New York. What chilled me wasn't the map itself, but what was scribbled on the back. You were meant to find this. No signature, just that. I'm a cartographer by trade. Have been for 22 years, so naturally a mysterious, unrecorded area with clear topography piqued my interest. But there was no mention of Meyerfield Hollow in any archive, online database, or topographic survey I could find. I even ran the coordinates through my own mapping software. Nothing. It was as if the place didn't exist. Against my better judgment, I took the weekend off and drove toward the general area where the map seemed to point. I passed through small towns where people stared a bit too long, said too little. When I asked about the hollow, faces went blank or suddenly busy with something else. Finally, I found a dirt road that aligned with the map's markings, though it was overgrown and looked unused for decades. I parked my truck and set off on foot. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no animals, not even the crunch of leaves beneath my boots after a while. The trail twisted unnaturally, sometimes looping me back without my realizing it. The trees seemed wrong, too tall, too still. At some point, my phone stopped working. No signal, no battery drop, just dead. Then came the symbols, carved into trees, scattered on rocks, circles intersecting lines, arrows pointing nowhere. They matched the ones on the map, each marking a strange landmark, a split oak, a dry creek, a moss-covered obelisk. I felt like I was being guided, but by whom or what, I couldn't say. Still, I kept walking. I don't know why. Just as dusk began to fall, I found a clearing. And in that clearing stood a cabin, abandoned by the looks of it. The wooden panels were rotted, the windows blacked out, and the door hung half off its hinges. But the map led directly to it. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of mold and ash. There were remnants of a life once lived, rusty tools, a decaying cot, pages of a journal strewn across the floor. I picked one up. The handwriting was erratic, desperate. One line stood out. The map only finds the ones it wants. Don't trust the path. It changes. It learns you. My breath hitched. Something creaked upstairs. I wasn't alone. I crept up the stairs slowly, every step groaning under my weight. At the top, a single room with a writing desk. On the wall, hundreds of maps, hand-drawn, all variations of Meyerfield Hollow, but none identical. Trails changed, landmarks vanished or appeared. I saw one that looked exactly like the one I had. Beneath it, Daniel Rowe arrived. I stumbled back. How the hell did they know my name? And then I heard it, whispering, faint, like wind through reeds, but unmistakable. It was calling my name. The walls felt like they were bending, the maps curling toward me like reaching fingers. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. I woke up in my truck, the sun already high in the sky. My boots were caked in mud, and the map was gone. Just gone. I tried to trace my way back, but the dirt road was no longer there. No clearing, no signs, nothing. As if the forest had swallowed the hollow whole. Weeks passed. I kept searching. Every night, I'd redraw the map from memory, only for it to change again by morning. I wasn't sleeping. People said I looked pale, distant. My own sister begged me to stop, but I couldn't, because last night a new map appeared, taped to my window from the outside, and this time the name on it wasn't mine, it was hers. The day started with nothing unusual, just another slow Sunday morning in Vienna. Rain tapped lightly against the window as Alan Westbrook, a 52-year-old British travel writer, sipped his coffee in the dim light of his rented apartment. He had come to Austria to finish a book he hadn't even started, hoping a change of scenery would break his writer's block. But instead, he found himself wandering antique markets, chasing oddities and distractions. At the edge of Naschmarkt, tucked beneath a crooked canopy, he spotted it, an old leather scroll tied with frayed rope, hidden beneath rusted compasses and chipped figurines. The vendor, a hunched man with glassy eyes, barely spoke. When Alan asked how much, the man simply said, "You should not want this." Alan chuckled. "I've made a career chasing things I shouldn't want." He paid in cash, tucked the scroll into his coat, and walked away with the kind of thrill he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know then that what he carried was not just a map, but an invitation. Back in his apartment, Alan unrolled the scroll on the dining table. It wasn't a traditional map. It had no borders, no compass, no legend. Just an endless swirl of lines that intersected like veins or roots. But as he stared, something odd happened. He could hear it, not a sound in the room, but in his mind. Faint whispers, like wind through dead leaves, guiding his eyes along the curves. He touched the paper. It was warm. With each minute, the lines began to make sense. Roads, hills, landmarks. A location slowly formed, somewhere in Lower Austria. At the center of the map, a black circle pulsed like an ink stain. Haus der Stille, the house of silence. A sudden knock at the door startled him. No one was there, but on the floor lay a small folded note. In slanted handwriting, "Don't follow the map. It's not yours to read." Alan drove into the countryside the next morning, map in his coat pocket, ignoring the warning. As he left the highway, GPS lost signal. Birds stopped singing. The air felt heavier. An unsettling hush enveloped the landscape. At the end of a narrow road choked with vines, he found it. A decrepit mansion swallowed by ivy. With no doors, only a gaping entrance where wind hummed a low, dissonant note. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The floor groaned beneath his boots. The interior smelled of wet stone and forgotten time. Walls were carved with symbols that seemed to shimmer when he blinked. At the end of the hall, a staircase spiraled downward, impossibly long, as if it reached below the earth's skin. He descended, guided not by light, but by a rhythmic whisper, soft, coaxing, ancient. The basement opened into an immense underground chamber, lit by candles that shouldn't have burned. At its center sat a man, or what once was one. Skin stretched tight over bones, eyes blind and milky, but mouth still capable of forming words. "You have brought the map." Alan froze. "What is this place?" The creature, archivist he called himself, grinned. "A library of fates. All who read the map bring a story, but only one leaves." On the stone walls were shelves, not of books, but of scrolls identical to Alan's. Thousands, each labelled with a name. Some names had been crossed out violently. Others had been rewritten. "Choose your way back," said the archivist. "But every path requires an offering." Alan turned to leave, but the staircase was gone. Where there had been stone, now there was only wall. His hands trembled. He unrolled the map. It had changed. The swirl was gone. Now it showed the underground chamber, and a black X where he stood. Another mark appeared beside it, a second X. Moving closer, panicking, Alan backed away. The archivist smiled wider. "You are not alone down here." In the far corner, movement, something crawling on the ceiling, pale limbs, no eyes, just a stitched mouth and elongated fingers. Alan ran, following any corridor the map lit for him. Yes, lit. It was glowing now, blood-red lines showing temporary escape routes. Behind him, the creature moaned through its sewn lips. Alan stumbled into a circular room lined with mirrors. In the centre, an altar. His scroll floated above it, spinning slowly, unravelling itself mid-air. In the reflection, Alan didn't see himself. He saw others, hundreds of faces screaming, trying to claw through the glass. Past readers of the map, the voice returned, not spoken, but felt in his bones. "You must draw your own path now, or become a reflection." A quill rose from the altar. Alan grabbed it and began sketching furiously. His childhood home, a street in London, his brother's cottage. As he drew, the path formed on the map. The altar grew brighter, but the moment he stopped to catch his breath, the ink began to fade. The voices screamed louder. The stitched creature reached the doorway. He forced himself to draw again. One final line, back to the flea market. The map hissed. The mirrors shattered. Alan woke up in the middle of Nashmarkt, face down on cobblestones, scroll clenched in his fist, blood on his fingers. People were crowding around, someone calling for an ambulance. But the map was gone. Back at his flat, Alan stared into the mirror. His reflection didn't move in sync. It blinked before he did, smiled when he didn't. And every night since, he hears whispers from the scroll he no longer possesses. Last week, a package arrived for him with no return address. Inside, a mirror and a note. "Your story is now shelved. Others are still writing." It started with a brown, weathered envelope left on the doorstep of Eric Halverson's rural home in Minnesota. No name, no return address, just his. Eric, a recently retired geography teacher in his mid-50s, lived a quiet life cataloguing old maps and hiking local trails. So, when he opened the envelope and unfolded an ancient, brittle parchment covered in unfamiliar topography, something in his gut twisted. The map looked hand-drawn, aged with a sepia tint, and covered in strange notations. But what disturbed him most were the markings. Small, delicate X's scattered across forests that didn't seem to exist. "What in God's name is this?" he muttered, tracing a path marked in red that started near a lake he knew like the back of his hand. Only the map showed a second lake beside it, one that didn't exist. That night, Sleep wouldn't come. Eric sat at his desk with a magnifying glass, poring over every corner of the map. The paper seemed to whisper when touched, as if the ink still remembered the hand that drew it. He felt ridiculous thinking it, but there was an odd pull, a curiosity that clawed at the rational part of his mind. At 2:37 a.m., he made his decision. He would follow the red trail the next day. By morning, the sky had turned to slate, and the air hung heavy with moisture. Eric packed his compass, an old field notebook, and a flashlight. He reached the familiar lake by midday, and to his growing unease, the map led him beyond the trails he knew into thick, gnarled woods, where the trees seemed volumes far older than the rest of the forest. The birds fell silent the moment he crossed a mossy ridge, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Eric checked the map again. According to it, he was now between the real lake and the mysterious second one, but no body of water was visible, only trees. Trees that looked like they'd been untouched for centuries, towering and silent. He pressed on, guided by the red path inked in the old paper. Every so often, he'd hear what he thought was the crunch of footsteps behind him, but each time he turned, nothing, just the rustling leaves and the occasional gust of wind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. After hours of walking, Eric came upon a clearing he swore had never existed before. And there it was, a lake, black as ink, perfectly round, absolutely still. It wasn't on any modern map. It shouldn't have been there. Yet, somehow, it had been waiting. He stared at the water, goosebumps rising on his skin. It reflected nothing, not the trees, not the sky, not even him. He crouched and dipped his fingers into the surface, half expecting a ripple. But the water was ice cold and didn't move, not even slightly. "This is impossible," he whispered. From his backpack, he retrieved the map again. A new mark had appeared, an X, precisely where he was standing. No way. This wasn't here before. His heart pounded. He dropped the map and backed away. As he did, the sound of dragging echoed from the woods. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. Eric panicked. He turned on his flashlight, though it was barely 4 p.m. Yet somehow the forest had darkened into twilight. Shadows moved unnaturally fast, stretching long and thin across the forest floor. He checked his watch. 3:58 p.m. Blinked. Checked again. 6:13 p.m. He turned to leave, but the path he came from was gone. Completely gone. In its place were trees, densely packed with no break. He stumbled backward, breathing fast. No, no, no. I came from that way. I know I did. He pulled out the map. It had changed again. The red path was now behind him, curling back into the woods, but it was distorted, looping in on itself like a maze. Branches above creaked loudly, like groaning bones. Something brushed past him. He spun, light sweeping through the trees. Nothing, but he wasn't alone. Something was watching him. Something that didn't breathe, but somehow lived. Trying to calm himself, Eric remembered the symbols on the map, strange shapes he dismissed as decorative. Now they looked like warnings, ancient ones, a language of caution. He stared at the nearest tree and froze. Etched into the bark was one of the same symbols from the map, fresh, deep, and bleeding sap. Eric felt dizzy, disoriented, like something was unraveling inside him. His flashlight flickered and then died. The map pulsed faintly in the dark, a soft glow. The red trail moved right before his eyes. It led toward the lake again. "No, I'm not going back there," he hissed. But the forest didn't care. A wind, cold and unnatural, pushed him, physically shoved him toward the water. His steps weren't his own anymore. Every tree seemed to lean in, whispering in a language he couldn't comprehend. He doesn't remember diving into the lake. He just remembers the cold. A cold so sharp it felt like knives in his chest. And then, nothing. He awoke on his porch the next morning, dry, fully clothed, the map folded neatly beside him. But something was wrong. The trees outside looked older. The birds sang different tunes. And when he looked inside his house, it wasn't quite the same. The furniture was off, like someone had tried to copy it but got the details just a bit wrong. Then he saw the newspaper on the porch. The date read, October 12th, 2038. He had been gone for 13 years. Eric never told anyone the full story. Who would believe it? But he kept the map locked in a drawer, until one day he opened it again. And there, beside the lake, was another new mark. Another X. Only this time, it had a name beneath it. His daughter's. He called her. No answer. He drove to her apartment. Empty. Abandoned. Like she'd been gone for years. On her kitchen table was a brown envelope. No name, just his daughter's.